on lesson number 8 of this series, and it's called Thinking Inside the Box. But before we get started, let's do the tip of the week. And what I'm going to talk about is removing the thread from your machine and where you should cut your thread to remove it. You should always cut the thread right between the tension discs and the spool of thread. In this case, on a mid-arm, it would be right in this area. On your domestic, it would be snipped right at the spool. And the reason for this is, if you look at the end of the thread coming out of the needle because of the wear on the thread, do you see how fuzzy it is? Versus the freshly cut end of thread. Now, when you remove the thread, if you snip it where I'm telling you and you pull the thread tail down through the needle, the freshly cut end is going through your tension disc instead of the fuzzy part that would go through if you just whip the thread up from the spool all the way from the needle. I hope that is a good tip for you. So with that out, let's get started with this lesson. In this week's handout, you'll have a lesson plan material that shows you how to mark off your grid for this lesson. So you're basically going to end up with a grid of 1-inch diagonal squares. I'd like to talk to you a little bit if you're going to use rulers to stitch this design. If you look, there's a 3/4 inch mark on that ruler. If you line that up with your previous line of stitching, you'll always end up with your parallel lines 1 inch apart. The nice thing about using in the rulers is in that case, you would only need to mark one diagonal line going from left to right and the other diagonal line going from top to bottom. The rest of them you can do just using your rulers. For those of you who do not have a ruler, don't like to use rulers, or just want to venture out on your own some other way, you could use your walking foot if you're using your domestic machine. If you're going to free motion these lines and you have a steady hand, that's fine too. Whatever it takes to get all the lines stitched out. This is actually the hardest part of the whole design. So just sit back and relax and know that the hard work's about done. I was just thinking, wouldn't it be nice if we really could quilt this fast? How many quilts could we get done in a week? It would be wonderful. And when you're all done, this is what you'll end up with, your 6-inch square with 1-inch diamonds. Now that the hard work's out of the way, let's start the fun part. And now we're going to let our fingers do the walking. And by that I mean you don't have to have a death grip on your fabric. You can just lightly hold your fabric with your fingers, and you're just going to swing your fabric back and forth. It doesn't have to be perfect. You want to keep your fabric just parallel and just keep wiggling it back and forth just like this. Try to stay within the lines. And when you get down to the little point, just go straight down into the next diamond and continue to go back and forth. Straight down now. Now this is just what we taught our kids to do before they went to school. We taught them to go from one place to another and to color inside the lines. So while your poor kids and grandkids are off at school, you can tell them that you are coloring too, only you're coloring with thread. Now we're going to get to a point here that we have to stop and think. What we need to think about now is going to the next area that we're going to stitch. And since this is going to be a checkerboard, we want to skip one row and go to the following row and begin the process all over again. When I was a kid, we used to make our own carbon paper for tracing by scribbling on the back of a piece of paper with a pencil, going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, just like we're doing with the machine. That's what this reminds me of. Of course, we didn't have to stay within the lines back then, we just scribbled. But now that we've matured, we can stay inside the lines. When you're all done with all your coloring inside the boxes, this is what you're going to end up with. Probably isn't something you want to put on a quilt, but wait, there's more. I've been trying to teach you to think inside the box so far, but now I want you to not think inside the box, but understand there is no box when it comes to free motion quilting. You guys are getting so good at free motion quilting that in addition to your homework of doing what we've just done here, I'd like to see you take this and do something with it and post that doing something with it to our Facebook page as well. Good luck with that, and I'll show you what I've done so that you can see this really is a nice design to know how to do. I've taken this design and I've put feathers in a block and then placed those squares around the feathers. Pretty, isn't it? The fantastic things you guys have been doing, I can hardly wait to see what you come up with. See you next week.